This morning, I saw a guy doing walking meditation near this hall. He's quite young. At first, his practice was good, but then his mind wandered off. Dhamma practice is not just doing walking or sitting meditation. The important thing is mindfulness. If you're mindful in every step you make, that's the ultimate practice. Or if you're mindful every time you inhale and exhale, that's the ultimate practice. Doing long sitting or walking meditation may not be practice. If your mind wanders off during the session, it's better not to do it. A bad habit is when you meditate and your mind gets engrossed in delusion and mindless joy, or your mind sees mental visions of heavenly beings. Don't do it. This reinforces this bad habit. It's better to be a normal non-practitioner than doing it wrong. There are two wrong paths. One is to be mindless, and the other is to overfocus and become stressful. If you don't have mindfulness during the practice, it's not acceptable. No matter how long you do the walking meditation, it's self-torture. You induce stress because you want to be successful. If you let your mind wander off and enjoy pleasurable thoughts continuously, you're indulging in sensual pleasures, like enjoying watching birds or trees. It's self-indulgence. You can indulge yourself like that all night long, and it's still self-indulgence. In order to practice the Buddha's middle path, we need mindfulness and samadhi. Mindfulness detects movements of your body and mind. Samadhi is having a stable mind that is at rest and doesn't wander off, not over-focusing and fixating on the body, the mind, or your practice object. If you can walk the middle path, enlightenment is possible in this lifetime. If you cannot, it will be wasteful years or lifetimes. One day, I visited a school and saw one of my students practicing walking meditation. I hesitated whether to advise him, but I didn't hold back and told him that your mind was like this several years ago. The mind still hasn't improved, and it will stay this way for the next several years. I didn't advise him further why, but I'm telling you, his mind wasn't along the correct path. When practicing, he tried to make the mind empty. He was stuck and engrossed in peacefulness. That is a delicate sensual pleasure. On the other hand, if someone becomes stressful during practice, forcing and dragging oneself to practice against one's feelings, that is self-torture. That self-torture is also useless. When you practice, are you doing these two extremes? Observe yourself. There's no need for someone to read your mind for you. That is usually nonsense. Like the blind leading the blind. You don't know where you'll end up. Observe your mind and see phenomena arise. You can practice by silently reciting Put when breathing in and To when breathing out. You can practice walking meditation. The key is, whenever the mind wanders off to think and forget your practice object, know that the practice is too slack, and you're indulging in sensual pleasures. If you practice sitting or walking meditation and become stressful, having intense breathing, or feeling stiff when moving, you're doing self-torture. Observing what you're doing wrong will lead you to practice correctly. If you practice incorrectly, falling into either extreme, but are proud of the long hours you put in, then you don't understand the correct practice. You can start practicing by reading the Buddha's first teaching. He taught all the principles of practice there. In the beginning, he said there are two extremes that a practitioner should not do. One is to be too slack, letting the body and mind wander off, and follow sensual pleasures. The other is physical or mental torture by oneself. What the Buddha told us to do is to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. It is the middle path that doesn't fall into the two extremes. We do so by observing the mind. No matter what posture you're in, when the mind wanders off to think, know so. Once you know so, the wandering off phenomenon will immediately stop. During practice, know if the body or the mind is stressed out from over-focusing and fixating. This stress in the mind can stiffen the body. Observe so. Knowing about your over-focusing won't immediately cure it, as over-focusing is a good karma, while the mind wandering off to get lost in sensual pleasures is a bad karma, or unwholesomeness. Once the mindfulness detects unwholesomeness, the phenomena will immediately cease. But knowing about your over-focusing won't immediately cure it, as it is a way to practice to reach the Brahman realm, which is not unwholesome, but it is not the path to Nibbana. Letting the mind wander off following sensual pleasures is unwholesome and can cause rebirth in the bad realm, while over-focusing is wholesome. It can cause rebirth in the Brahman realm, which isn't the path to Nibbana. That's the realm Prince Siddhartha's former teachers, Alaro Kalamo and Udako Ramaputo, were reborn in. When the mind wanders off, that is unwholesomeness and impurity. Once mindfulness knows, the impurity will cease immediately. So, when you become mindful that your mind has wandered off, the knowing mind will arise automatically. But when the mind knows that it is over-focusing, the over-focusing and dense feeling won't cease, because over-focusing isn't an unwholesomeness. If you want to reduce over-focusing, you must observe what drives that behavior. What drives over-focusing are the desires, cravings, and greed. You may wonder why greed drives the mind to over-focus, and why over-focusing isn't unwholesome. Unwholesomeness and impurities can give rise to wholesomeness. Unwholesomeness can also give rise to wholesomeness. For example, when mindfulness knows that the mind has wandered off, the wandering off phenomenon, which is unwholesome, ceases immediately. The mind is over-focusing, and you're controlling the body and the mind. That in itself is an unwholesomeness. It's not the wholesomeness that a wise practitioner aims for. You can observe that what drives your over-focusing is the greed to be wholesome. When you practice, you want to be constantly mindful. You crave no period of mindlessness. This causes over-focusing. Once you know this craving, the over-focusing symptom will cease, because its cause is eradicated. Its cause is craving. Craving causes bhava, or becoming. Over-focusing is also bhava, of a practitioner. On the other hand, the mind that wanders off causes another becoming a non-practitioner. And non-practitioners are likely to be reborn in bad realms. A practitioner can be born in a good realm, as high as the Brahman realm. But if you want to liberate yourself from all bhavas, or becoming, you observe until you see the root cause of your over-focusing. The mind wants to be wholesome, become liberated, and acquire freedom. Do you see that it is full of cravings and greed? When we think about practicing, we want to practice. Have you ever noticed that? If you want to practice, when you practice, you will over-focus. Suppose I tell you to start the practice now. What do? Control and adjust your posture first to be good-looking. Once your posture is satisfactory, you try to control the mind to be still. That practice is useless. The most benefit you get is the Brahman realm. So, when you notice that you're over-focusing or stressed out during practice, see the cravings and greed behind it. The greed to become wholesome, knowledgeable, or enlightened. Once you're mindful of the cravings and greed in your mind, the cravings and greed will cease, since they're unwholesome. Bhava, or becoming, that is caused by the greed will disappear. The dense feeling, however, will linger on a bit longer. This is because denseness is already the result of the act of over-focusing, the result of your own karma. It will take some time for the mind to unwind. This period won't last long if you don't feed in more desire to be good at practicing. But if you keep craving to be good at practicing, you keep adding fuel to the fire, and the dense feeling won't cease. The middle path is very important in our practice. Before I became a monk, the things I taught my friends the most were, don't let the mind wander off. Don't over-focus. Letting the mind wander off is too slack. Over-focusing and fixating is too strict. Back then, some people laughed at this teaching and thought it was ridiculous. But I believe this is in line with what the Buddha taught. His first teaching started from pointing out the two extremes that practitioners should not do. Letting your mind wander off is getting mindlessly lost in sensual pleasures, while over-focusing is self-torture. We avoid the two extremes and just be mindful, with a stable and concentrated mind. Use that kind of mind to observe the body and the mind, and wisdom will be cultivated. If the mind lacks sufficiency of these two qualities, sati or mindfulness, and samadhi, stability and concentration, then you lack right effort. I want to focus on three components of the Eightfold Path: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right effort is the right persistence. Right mindfulness is not over-focusing and stressing out. Right concentration is the stable quality of the mind to be concentrated on its observation of body and mind without your control. We don't control the mind. If the mind wanders off and you become mindful of the phenomenon, right concentration arises automatically. And we don't maintain it, but we practice continuously, having the right effort, until right concentration arises and ceases frequently enough, so we feel as if the mind is stable and concentrated for the entire day. I have been practicing like this since I was a lay person. My mindfulness was quick. Whatever phenomenon arose in the body or the mind knew so. My samadhi was consistent, giving the mind stability, mindfulness, and blissfulness. I didn't need to maintain it. Why didn't I need to? Because my mindfulness was quick. Once the mind started to wander off, my mind quickly detected the tiny movements. Some senior teachers like Luangpu didn't know my name. Since I never introduced my name when I went to see them, I felt that was a waste of time. Luangpu called me the knower. It was my nickname. Whenever he saw me, he called me the knower. Luangpu gave me the nickname the practitioner. When he met me, he greeted me by saying, "Greetings, practitioner. What practice experience have you got to share with me this time?" Why was I called a practitioner or a knower? It was because my mindfulness and samadhi were strong. Why did they become strong? Because I had the right effort and was diligent in practice. Right effort doesn't mean diligence to do a lot of walking or sitting meditation, but the effort to practice one's mindfulness and samadhi. As an example, my way to practice stability was to observe when my mind had been consumed and engrossed by a phenomenon. Once mindfulness detected that the mind was engrossed by a phenomenon, I started my internal timer. I gave myself 3 to 5 seconds to have the mind detach from the engrossment and become a stable observer. I kept practicing until this process automatically got very quick. When my mindfulness detected that mind had become engrossed in something, the mind sprang itself free from the engrossment. This is the result of right effort. What effort? It is not practicing sitting or walking meditation for long hours. Right effort means the effort to eradicate existing impurities, prevent new impurities from arising, develop new wholesomeness, and make existing wholesomeness stronger. Right effort focuses on dealing with the mind's unwholesomeness and wholesomeness. So, if you practice walking meditation all night while the mind is consumed with greed to be enlightened, your impurities won't be reduced because your acts were driven by greed. So, the effort has to be right. Be diligent in your practice with right effort, not wrong effort. Putting in effort that's driven by impurities won't work. Controlling yourself while practicing and getting stressed out won't work. This isn't right effort. It's not eradicating existing impurities. When you can do sitting meditation for a long time with greed driving you, the feeling of I'm so good, I practice so much will arise. Instead of taming the impurities, your ego got bigger instead. These 3 components in the Eightfold Path that I just talked about is about practicing the mind. The 8 components of the path are divided into 3 parts. The beginning practitioner's wisdom are the right view and right thought. Then for moral conduct, there are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Then for practicing the mind, there are right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. If you practice until your mind attains automatic stability, whether a phenomenon arises in the body or the mind, your mindfulness will know it automatically. It detects the phenomenon automatically, and the mind will be stable and separated from the observed phenomenon without requiring any effort. There's no need for you to try to build or maintain this stability. Once you achieve this kind of skill, there's automatic right effort. When an impurity arises, the mind knows so automatically. The same also happens when wholesomeness arises. Getting the mind to have this quality requires repeated practice. Practice knowing phenomena frequently, and your mindfulness will be automatic. Knowing it infrequently doesn't work. Keep practicing to observe the phenomena frequently. Whatever impurity arises, know so. Knowing impurities give rise to both right effort and right mindfulness. And once mindfulness detects impurity, right concentration also arises. All of this happens in a flash, as if they're combined into one. You have right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration by observing your impurities. Once mindfulness detects impurity, you already have right effort. Some are prone to lust and greed. Some are prone to anger. Some are prone to have unfocused, blurry minds. Some are prone to sad feelings. Whatever the mind is, know so. Keep at it. After a while, when your mind starts to wander off, mindfulness will automatically detect it, and the diffusion ceases. The existing unwholesomeness ceases, and as long as we have mindfulness, new unwholesomeness will not arise. Whenever mindfulness arises to detect unwholesomeness, wholesomeness has arisen, because mindfulness is wholesome. If mindfulness arises frequently, wholesomeness gets stronger. Eventually, the mind will have all the right ingredients: mindfulness, smati, panya, and right effort. When you practice, don't fall into the 2 extremes. Have a practice object. Have diligence. For example, inhaling while silently reciting put and exhaling with to And don't do it for calmness, happiness, or wholesomeness. Use breathing and reciting as the mind's practice object, which Luangpu often said, as an object for the mind to know and an object for mindfulness to recall. He liked to use this phrase. So, we need a practice object as a home base. For example, you can use breathing while reciting and be mindful of them. Don't aim for peacefulness. If you do so, the mind will overfocus and get tense. And don't be mindless, having the mind wander off to think about other things after a brief period of observing the breath and reciting. That's the other extreme. Practice every day. Do walking meditation with mindfulness. Don't be mindless. Don't control yourself. Do sitting meditation with mindfulness. Don't let the mind wander off. Don't control yourself. After a while, the mind will be stable on its base. Whatever impurity arises, know so. Why don't I say, whatever wholesomeness arises, know so? Because wholesomeness rarely happens to us. Unwholesomeness arises more frequently. Do you see this? Unwholesomeness and impurities arise frequently and quickly. Wholesomeness arises much less frequently. For example, your mind may wander off and get lost in delusions for an hour or two. Then mindfulness arises and ceases in a flash. The length of delusion is much longer, so the mind is mostly filled with unwholesomeness. We learn from the phenomena that occur frequently in our minds. Unwholesomeness is our resource to practice. Don't reject it. When the mind is unwholesome, whether it is greed, aversion, diffusion, or depression, know so. When mindfulness detects unwholesomeness, unwholesomeness will cease and wholesomeness will arise. When mindfulness detects a phenomenon like anger, anger will cease. The mind will become stable. So these three components, mindfulness, stability, and effort, work together. Practice every day. Eventually, the mind will enter absorption and your concentration will be full. It will be right concentration on the appana samadhi or full absorption level. There are both right and wrong appana samadhi, but having right mindfulness, right effort, and right concentration will give rise to right view. The Eightfold Path starts with right view, followed by right thought, which is thought that is not contaminated by impurities. If the thoughts are driven by lust, anger, or delusions, these are not right thoughts. The thoughts are called kama vitaka, or sensual thoughts, payabad vitaka, hating thoughts, or vihimsa vitaka, or encroaching thought. Keep observing your mind. When you see the mind get attached to a view or an opinion, know so. Know that impurities drive your thoughts. Keep practicing, and eventually you'll reach the same conclusion. Mindfulness is what keeps a watchful eye over your body and mind. As an unenlightened person, you'll be attached to a wrong view or opinion. Deep down inside, the mind's views are still always wrong. But by listening to the Buddha's teachings, we can logically tell which view is right or wrong. For example, every unenlightened person has a view that self really exists. So, you need to develop right view. What right view do we need to see? See your body and mind. See their impermanence, conflicting and decaying nature, and that it is non-self. That is not yet enlightenment, but you assist and guide the mind with thoughts and contemplation. Instead of letting the mind wander off, you observe that the mind has slipped into wrong view, that self exists again. When the thoughts are driven by lust, anger, or delusions, you observe what's behind these thoughts. Most of them are our impurities. Keep knowing so. The tool that enables the mind to know phenomena is mindfulness. When you resolve to keep the moral precepts, and some thoughts occur in your mind and you want to state them. Observe what's behind these thoughts. You'll see that it's impurities again. You know so. If you want to berate someone, know the anger that arises. Or when you want to state some political opinions to gratify yourself, know the impurity behind them. Not only will you get to practice mindfulness and samadhi, your speech will also be right. If the mind isn't tainted by impurities, your speech will be right. You won't utter speech that causes disunity, is profane, diffused, or untrue. Your speech will be full of loving kindness and compassion. You will speak the right words at the right time. Right speech will happen automatically if you have mindfulness. Mindfulness is a big part of your practice, especially mindfulness that observes the mind's impurities. Whatever happens to the mind, know so. If your ego arises, and the self that has a high self-admiration arises with it, know so. When thoughts arise, know what's driving these thoughts. Is it greed, anger, or delusions? Know what's driving your speech. It's also the impurities. When you choose an occupation, know so. When you want to crush an insect or kill an animal, know why you want to kill. When mindfulness detects unwholesomeness, it will cease, and so will the desire to kill. If you want to steal or have an affair, and you know the impurities behind your intended actions, all improper actions won't be committed. Having mindfulness, knowing your own impurities, is the best practice. Your livelihood will be pristine, and that is right effort. That is practicing mindfulness and samadhi. When you have mindfulness, observing your own impurities, that is practicing walking the Eightfold Path. Then, for a moment, the mind will enter absorption. Why is right mindfulness the last component? Why do we start from right view? Right view is the right theory, giving us proper guidance. That leads to right thoughts, speech, actions, and effort. With right effort, mindfulness will rise automatically. So will right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When all these components arise automatically, real panya or wisdom will arise. If it's a high-level wisdom, it's called Lokuttara Panya or transcendental wisdom, which occurs when the mind enters appana samadhi or a deep absorption. That is not kanika samadhi or momentary concentration like we normally can attain. When the mind has developed enough, the mind enters deep absorption automatically. Did you notice that I say things occur automatically? If you study with me and these wholesomeness qualities don't arise automatically, you're still not skillful. You need to practice until they arise automatically. Getting angry and about to hit someone? Mindfulness detects that automatically. If you can practice like this, enlightenment is within reach. To summarize, when you practice, don't fall into the two extreme ends. Then practice mindfulness. Mindfulness will shield the mind from unwholesomeness, and the 8 components of the Noble Eightfold Path will develop. While you're practicing, it's not yet called Ariyamat or enlightenment, but it is called the beginning of the path to enlightenment. Enlightenment occurs in a flash. All 8 qualities that you've been accumulating will fuse into one. The one that holds all 8 components together is right concentration, and that's why right concentration is the last one on the list. It is the container that holds the other 7 components. Once all 8 components fuse together, there will be an enormous force that can permanently eradicate some of your deepest impurities permanently. While having mindfulness detecting lust, anger, or delusions, they disappear, but they will arise again. But if you clean an impurity with enlightenment, the impurity that has been cleansed will be permanently eradicated. There is an end to our Dhamma practice, unlike worldly tasks. Worldly duties never end, but Dhamma practice ends at enlightenment and their fruits are fully attained. Attainment here is only used as a figure of speech. No one attains or loses anything. That person just gets to know the truth and gets to observe Nibbana. No one owns Nibbana. Nibbana is non-self, but it is permanent and without any conflict or decay. Keep practicing. There's no need to be enlightened tomorrow, this year, or next year. The task is to practice to the best of your abilities, without falling into the two extreme ends. Have mindfulness. It will protect you from unwholesomeness. Eventually, all the 8 components of enlightenment will automatically fuse together. When we reach the automatic stage, you'll see that you're not making any effort, but the mind itself does all the work. But if you haven't reached that level, you must put in the effort first. If you don't practice, you won't attain automatic right mindfulness, right samadhi, and panya. All the right components develop automatically. Patiently practice. It's fine not to see results today, but keep at it. Show respect to the Buddha. Chant. Practice sitting or walking meditation. Make it your daily routine. When you practice, don't fall to the two extremes. Then keep observing your mind. If you're successful at this practice, you will know that Lord Buddha really exists, and his teachings that can lead one to liberation really does too. And the disciples who follow his path until reaching liberation really exist too. Why will you believe all these? Because you see it yourself. Even for a stream enterer, many impurities still exist, but some impurities have been permanently eradicated. Immense bliss will follow. Stream enterers see the path of practice, and that walking the path can truly eradicate suffering from their minds. Their minds have complete confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and other enlightened disciples. Stream enterers have complete confidence and faith in the Buddha, his teachings, and his enlightened disciples. Ordinary people don't. They respect Buddha on a day-to-day basis. If the teachings don't interfere with their values or benefits, they want to practice. Some days they get lazy, some days they feel they're close to enlightenment, and the next day they'll doubt whether enlightenment really exists or whether this practice can really lead to liberation. The mind hesitates and is unconfident. This symptom persists until one reaches the first enlightenment and becomes a stream enterer. One will know that the Buddha really exists. The teachings that lead to liberation is true, and following his teachings will lead one to liberation. All of this will be known by the enlightened person himself or herself. At that point, the mind is totally convinced. No one can persuade him or her to believe that the Buddha might have lied. Buddhism isn't just a philosophy. Today, we keep hearing about Buddhist philosophy. That term is total nonsense. But if you realize that the word prajna actually means wisdom in Sanskrit, that is acceptable. But if you think Buddhism is just a metaphysics, it is not that shallow. It is a discipline that leads to the mind's liberation. It's not guesswork. Practicing this discipline can lead to true liberation. There's no need for blind faith, but you have to try it out to find out. That's it for today. Is the teaching a little too fierce? Do you understand it? Who is confused? Raise your hands. Don't be shy. Listen to the rerun and you will get it. Question 1. I started practicing not long ago, and this is my first time I'm submitting my homework. I listen to you online and practice formally for about 20 minutes daily. I can observe the mind and the body in daily life occasionally, but most of the time I can't. I intend to practice continuously to honor the Buddha, but I know I haven't got much experience. But I have determination to continue practicing. I'd like to ask for your advice. Answer 1. What you're practicing is okay. You've made some positive changes. But observe one thing. Right now, your mind isn't stable and isn't with yourself. How long have you been practicing? This is good progress for 3 months of practice. What I teach can really yield results. Teachers in northeastern Thailand told their students that by listening to any one of my CDs, liberation from suffering is possible. They gave a big endorsement. From your 3 months of practice, your mind has really awakened, but it still tends to wander off and get lost for long periods of time. Keep practicing and use the body as the practice object more. You cannot rely on being mindful of the mind alone. You also need to observe the body. Do you see your body nodding? You can observe the body more clearly than the mind, so don't abandon observing the body. Question 2. I can see my feelings better. When I listen to your teachings, sometimes offensive thoughts about you occur to me. So I directly observe that the mind has offending thoughts towards you, and I dislike it. When wholesomeness arises, I like it, and I know so. I'd like to apologize to you, Mother Nut, and other teaching assistants. Am I practicing correctly, and how can I improve? Answer 2. First, your samadhi isn't correct. The mind is diffused all over. Can you observe this? Samadhi is very important, but don't try to maintain it. When you're mindful that the mind is diffused and has wandered off, samadhi will temporarily arise and cease. Observe your mind frequently, that it tends to be unstable and wanders off. Every time that the mind knows that it has wandered off, momentary stability will appear. This stability may seem minute, but starting from this small point, once samadhi occurs frequently, your mind will feel that stability lasts longer. This is the first problem. Second, your ego is very big. Can you tell? This is your mind's major impurity. You strongly believe in your opinions and views. Be mindful of this. Any view held by an ordinary person is definitely a wrong view. There's no need to believe me. Believe the Buddha. When the mind gets attached to opinions or views, know so. When the mind is diffuse and isn't stable, know so. Keep observing your mind frequently, and you will improve. It's not difficult. Your strong resolve to practice is a good quality. Question 3. Now when I try to formally practice, I feel the tense and start to overfocus immediately. During daily life, the overfocusing isn't too strong. When I know that I'm overfocusing, it doesn't go away. I know that the mind wants it to go away, but it doesn't work either. I can't observe my desire to be good very well. Please advise. Answer 3. This is what I just taught earlier. Knowing that the mind is overfocusing will not make it go away. On the other hand, knowing the mind that gets lost brings it back immediately. We need to see the deeper cause. Do you see the cravings to practice? From now on, when you crave to practice, know so. The craving will cease. After the craving ceases, do you practice? Yes. Why do you practice? Because it is something you should do. Because the cravings have died. You have aspiration instead of cravings to practice. The craving is the desire for the results of practice. It's the craving to be good. Aspiring to commit to a good cause isn't craving. You aspire to do the good cause. If you crave to do sitting or walking meditation, know so. And then, should you meditate? You should. do it diligently and consistently. At first, you may have strong feelings against practicing, but aspirations will come, and so will diligence. At first, you may crave to be good, but eventually the mind will see the harm of cravings. When the desire to practice occurs, you suffer. This is the suffering you created yourself. The mind has a craving and pressures itself until you become stressful, and the mind suffers. So you're reaping the results of its action. When you observe the mind, you suffer from overfocusing. The mind immediately gets tense. I just taught about all this before the Q&A session. If you miss anything, listen to today's recording. Question 4. I practice formally by observing my breathing and the impermanent nature of my mind. In daily life, I mainly observe my body's movements. I see the mind's movements and its degree of impartiality in observing phenomena varying. I feel that on some days I can practice well, and some days I don't know how to practice at all. I'm not sure about my progress and whether I'm still on track. Please advise. Answer 4. You practice well. Keep practicing. Keep knowing the mind that craves. Keep knowing the impurities that arise in the mind. Can you do so? You can. Everyone's different. The person sitting there is more skilled at observing the body than the mind. You're more skilled at observing the mind. But whether you're mainly observing the body or the mind, you must practice formally every day. Otherwise, the clarity of observation won't be there. Formal practice can be sitting still and silently reciting put when breathing in and to when breathing out. Practicing like this is like charging the mind's battery. Right now, your mind is unstable. Can you see? A stable mind isn't easy to talk about, but is hard to obtain. For most, it's either over-focusing or mind wandering off. You need patience to keep observing the mind that wanders off. If the mind becomes over-focused, know so and know its cause. The mind over-focuses because it wants to be good. Keep practicing. Mindfulness, samadhi, and panya will become automatic. At first, it will be like you're crawling on your hands and knees to move forward. Don't give up. At first, the progress will be very slow. Don't give in to the mind's impurities and keep practicing. Eventually, you will find it's not difficult anymore. It's like launching a rocket. The rocket moves very little in the first second, and then its acceleration makes it attain high speed quickly. Practicing is similar. At first, the progress is slow. It's very hard to notice any improvement. But after you finish practicing, it's impossible to be mindless, or for the mind to wander off or get diffused. Keep practicing, and one day you'll be skillful. What you're practicing is okay, but the mind isn't yet stable on its base. Question 5. Last time you told me I could start to develop wisdom, but my samadhi is a bit weak. I now feel that the mind has more strength, and my mindfulness and samadhi are better. Please advise. Answer 5. You got better, but there's a need for more improvement. Your samadhi is stronger, but it's not yet full. Do you know? Can you tell that your samadhi hasn't reached full strength? Practice formally every day with a practice object. When the mind wanders off, know so. When it over-focuses on the practice object, know so. Practice frequently. Then in daily life, keep observing your mind. You can observe mental phenomena, but your weakness is your mind gets diffused easily. So you need a practice object to shorten the periods of diffusion. You can use reciting putto or breathing as your object. This is to prevent the mind from wandering off for a long time. Keep practicing. You've made good improvements. Have you guys noticed a pattern here? When I advise individuals, it mostly comes down to the mind not having enough samadhi or wrong samadhi. If your samadhi isn't proper, you can't cultivate wisdom. Panya has samadhi as its proximate cause. Without proper samadhi, there's no wisdom. The mind will be stuck in thoughts and not knowing phenomena. Proper samadhi is very essential for the practice, and for most lay people, they lack samadhi. That's why I warn you repeatedly not to spend too much time on the internet. Stay away from needless conversations. Spend your time learning about your own body and mind. Your samadhi will improve this way. For example, a night out at a pub or a bar can wipe out a month's worth of strength from practicing. So have patience and resist immediate sensual pleasures, which can bring you long-term suffering. Keep at it every day, and your mind will have a lot of strength. The day I see your face and I call you the knower is the day that your samadhi is sufficient. Now, I'm pointing out to you to let you know that your mind has wandered off or you are over-focusing again. You're not yet a knower because you lack samadhi. Can a lay person become a knower? Definitely. I have been practicing since I was a lay person, so why can't you? You're not stupider than me, but you may not be as diligent. If you're diligent like I was, you'd start observing the phenomena from the moment you wake up. You'll be practicing when you're not doing work that requires thinking. Such thinking work prevents practicing, but when you don't need to do thinking work, observe your mind. When the body moves, know so. When the mind moves, know so. Do it frequently. Question 6. I see the phenomena flowing like water, and the mind is a separate knower. If the mind doesn't have sufficient strength, it will jump in and attach itself to the phenomena. It's like this all day long. My mindfulness and samadhi fight to keep the phenomena from mixing in with the knowing mind. It's a fight all day long. Please advise. Answer 6. Your mind isn't yet neutral and impartial. You have a knowing mind and see the observed phenomena separated from the knowing mind, but sometimes the strength isn't sufficient. When the mind doesn't have enough strength, it gets absorbed into phenomena, the thing that the mind's observing. You try to pull the knowing mind out, but that's useless. Practice samatha. Once the mind regains its strength, resume the practice. Do this repeatedly and it will get better. Your samadhi has improved a lot, but right now the stability is in place by your focusing. Stand up. Stand up again. Do you feel the mind that's over-focusing? The mind isn't lost. It's over-focusing. When it gets lost, it gets absorbed into the phenomena. When it's over-focusing, you have a tense feeling. These are the two extremes we avoid. You over-focus because you want to be good. Know the mind that's greedy for wholesomeness. Your big problem is that the mind's greedy. It's not impartial. Can you see? When the mind observes a phenomenon, it's not neutral. You don't like it. You want it to go away, and you want your mind to be peaceful and stable. Know this. This is more delicate impurity. It's more delicate than raw greed, aversion, or delusions that non-practitioners have. It's the cravings to be a good practitioner. Know so. Right now, you try to over-focus on the mind and pull it out from the phenomenon. Know so. If the mind wanders off, know so. If it over-focuses, know so. If it's mindful, know so. Don't try to preserve mindfulness. You will then see all phenomena flow past you like a river, with the mind being a distinct observer. After observing for a while, the mind may get lost and fall into and drown into the river of phenomena. Know so, and you will be back on the river bank. You'll then tense up and try not to fall into the river again, which is the other extreme of bad practice. Know so. The mind will switch from getting lost, being mindful, and being over-focused. Know the mind as it is and keep practicing. Question 7. I've been listening to your CDs for a year. I recite Putto and chant before I go to bed. I try to know the phenomena the way they are. Am I practicing correctly? Answer 7. You do it correctly, but you need to practice more. What you've done isn't sufficient. Luangpu once told me that practicing is a lifelong activity. Even after one has reached total enlightenment, one still keeps practicing. You still have impurities, so you practice every day. Soon, the good qualities will accumulate. Mindfulness, samadhi, and panya get stronger. Enlightenment will occur. Right now, it hasn't occurred because the mind is easily diffused. It's wiggling around. Can you see the mind wiggling? Observe your body as well. When the body moves, know so. Use the body as a practice object. Don't use only mental phenomena. Some students need to observe the body in addition to observing the mind. For you, if you only observe the abstract phenomena, the mind will sink into the many thoughts about practicing. So observe the body's movements, and your mind strength will improve. Practice patiently and continuously. Question 8. Last time I submitted my homework, you taught me to observe the impurities. I found that there are impurities behind my every action, but I cannot see it every time. Sometimes, I don't see it until long after the event has passed. Please give me further advice. Answer 8. It's good that you can see the impurities. It's common that the mind switches between mindfulness and mindlessness when you start to practice. When you're more skillful, each period of mindlessness will shorten. Keep practicing. Your mind is currently unstable and diffused. Try to observe breathing. Don't over-focus, just observe. Don't try to mess with the mind. Do you feel the difference between now and just a bit earlier? The mind's different. The stable mind is right here, not being engrossed in some void outside. The mind that wanders off and gets absorbed in emptiness isn't the way. The way is the mind that's stable and is ready to observe phenomena without your intervention. That's why I told you to use breathing as your practice object. Don't try to control anything. The mind will eventually return to the home base and be stable automatically. Once the mind is stable, observe the body and see whether the body is self. Do you see that the body isn't self? Do you see that the happy or sad feelings aren't self either? Neither are lust, anger, delusions. Keep observing and you'll find that self does not exist. Keep observing and practicing and you'll get even better. Also, observe the ego that I'm a good practitioner. This one is pretty strong. Be mindful of it. Question 9. I do sitting meditation and contemplate my breathing. I see the breathing becoming longer and more delicate sometimes. After that, some emptiness appears. When I get to this point, what should I do next? Answer 9. What you're doing isn't wrong. But when the mind moves away from emptiness, observe the body that's breathing. See that the body isn't self. The body is just elements and compositions. It's not something desirable. It belongs to this world. Practicing meditation like what you described earlier is correct. But once you stop practicing, start observing the body. This body isn't self, nor is it a desirable object. It isn't something worthy. It's temporary. Observe these qualities repeatedly, and you will be able to observe the mind better. When you can observe the body clearly, you can observe the mind more clearly as well. I myself have also practiced observing the body. When I went to see teachers, many of them taught students to observe the body, so I tried observing the body as well. After a while, I saw a mental vision of my body exploding. The body then disappeared and only the mind remained. I then kept observing the mind, seeing its impermanent nature. What you're practicing is pretty good. Keep at it. Keep accumulating good qualities. Enlightenment won't come with a couple days of practice. Make a strong dedication. Make it a lifelong dedication. If you don't achieve any results in this life, practice more next life. Make it a habit. If we don't practice, we'll be used to not practicing. In the next lives, the mind is not used to practicing, and start practicing will be even more difficult than in this life. Make yourself used to practicing and practice every day until it becomes your nature. If you can accumulate enough good qualities in this life, you'll be enlightened. If you can't, you'll be inclined to practice in the next life. The mind will remind itself to practice more, and you get closer to liberation that way. If you don't start now, the destination will always be far away. If you start now, it won't be very far for some people. There was a monk who could understand Dhamma only after 2 to 3 months of practice. Some still don't understand what practice is after several years. It depends on your endowment. If your endowment is good, you get results quickly and easily. If it's not so good, it will take a longer time. If you've accumulated little practice, but have accumulated a lot of impurities, your practice will be long and difficult. If you keep observing the mind's impurities every day, the impurities will get weaker. Even if you don't achieve anything in this life, next life's practice will be easy for you, because the impurities have already weakened. If you've practiced a lot and gained a lot of strength, the enlightenment will come to you quickly. Some people practice comfortably and become enlightened easily because their impurities are weak and their strength are very strong. Some practice comfortably but get results slowly because their impurities are weak but their strength isn't strong. Some have great difficulties at practice but get results quickly because their impurities are strong and their strength is also strong. Some have great difficulties at practice and get results slowly because they have strong impurities and weak strength. This is the law of karma. There's no free lunch. If you don't want to face difficulties in practicing, keep observing the mind. Accumulate moral precepts, samadhi, and panya as much as possible, and your enlightenment will come quickly. You see the truth because moral conduct, samadhi, and panya are full. If your moral conduct, samadhi, and wisdom aren't full, enlightenment won't come quickly. If the mind's impurities are strong, enlightenment won't come quickly. If the impurities are weak, enlightenment can come quickly. We practice by having mindfulness, knowing our own impurities. This results in weakened impurities and more insi or strength. Keep at it. It is the way of the world to rise and decay. Be full of happiness and sadness. Don't expect goodness, happiness, or peacefulness to last. Whatever happens is normal. What's not normal is your mind. Practice until you realize that everything in this world is impermanent, under conflict and decay, and isn't in our control. Things are not going the way we want to. If you can do it well, the world will have less influence on you. Eventually, you will be free from the world. When you're free from the world, it's called above the world. The world is still there, but the mind is above it. The mind won't be contaminated by the world. The world won't bring the mind suffering. The Pali term for above the world is lokuttara. It comes from loka and uttara. Uttara means north or above. Lokuttara means above loka or the world. The world is still full of suffering and is impermanent. But even though the world is impermanent, in conflict and decay, and can't be forced to be as you wish, the mind will be wise enough not to be attached to the world. It won't be influenced by the world's suffering. Practice well and your life will be peaceful. Otherwise, will be endlessly asking for peace, which does not exist. Humans have always asked for peace, because peace doesn't exist in this world. You cannot create peace in this world, but you can create peace in your mind. After successful practice, your mind will be at peace, even when the world is chaotic, which is the karma of all living things. Okay, go home, don't go out. COVID is still out there. It's all around us, so be careful.